Well, there's no doubt about it. When we emerge from coronavirus, it will be a different economy, a different country. From the 80s oil crisis to today's pandemic, one expert is sharing his 40-plus years of experience for everyone. Our very own Fox 10 Phoenix's Kari Lake talks with Stuart Adam about 401ks, opportunities you could take, and of course, the market.
I'm so pleased to be joined by Stuart Adam with Adam and Partners. He's got more than 4 decades of experience in investments and the markets and the world markets. And Stuart, you've lived through more than one crisis and crash in your lifetime. How does this one compare?
Well, they're all different. This one is really unique because I think it's reasonable to say that, we basically shut down 50% of the planet right now, okay? And it's hitting on the 2 areas that create the most fear: health and investment, financial insecurity. So you've got both of those, plus you've got job security issues, and people live, which is human nature, in the position of fear. And this has just really compounded it, and it's anxiety raising, it's overwhelming. But you have that in all the scenarios of all the different crises. But this is pretty unique.
It's interesting that you say that it's based on fear. I think there's a lot of fear whenever it comes to investing your money, because you're thinking, is it going to go away? Am I making a smart investment? And now people are looking at maybe their retirement or a little bit of savings they had and thinking it's going to completely be zapped if it hasn't already. Is it too late to make emergency moves with your investments since we're so far down the line in this?
No, I mean, there's no need to make emergency moves. I think what we've got to be careful of, and which we've seen, is when fear is present in individuals or in families or whatever, it triggers a reaction, which is, I'm going to lose everything. So what you got to do is you got to get yourself in a position, if you can, where you're not in reactive mode. And that comes down also to your own personal situation of like, okay, sit back, let's see where this is all going, because everybody's looking for the answer. When's the virus going to be done? Where's the vaccine going to be? And they're just barraged with information that it's very difficult to see through the mist, the fog, the information to pick a direction. And we're just really going to be teaching people how to invest and deal with the unknown. And it's very hard. It's like going through an earthquake. When you go an earthquake, there's nowhere to go, right? Everywhere is like this. It was the same with this situation. It's people are saying, well, where do I go? What do I do?
You hear the President Trump saying, we had the strongest economy in decades going into this. This happened. We are going to bounce back. We will bring this back. Is he being optimistic and kind of a national cheerleader, or do you think that is a real possibility?
Well, I think it's difficult when you're a leader of a country anyway. You have to create the optimism and hope that this is going to come forward. I do believe it will, because I think the world, and particularly in the United States, we're very creative, energetic. We adjust very quickly. I mean, if you just look at how people are adjusting to this now they understand how serious it is. They take it on their own bat to, do the distancing, wear the masks, etc. You see takeout restaurants that were sit-down restaurants. I mean, we're very adaptable, and we will continue that way. But initially, it's like, well, what do we do? So is he optimistic? He can't be anything else but that. He has to be. Because if he wasn't, it would be really not a good place to be, would it?
Yeah.
So it's, you can see by the way the government and the Federal Reserve have responded. And you look at Europe, you look at Asia, and there's about $10 trillion worth of liquidity going into these markets. And the economy, when you look at the global economy, is 80 trillion. Okay, and we're basically a significant part of that, along with our friends in China. So yeah, we'll come back. I don't know when exactly, but we will come back.
As somebody who has a 401k, I think my statement came today and I just put it aside and said, you know what, I'm not going to look at that right now. Is there something that people who have just a basic work 401k should be doing? Should they do what I'm doing and kind of put my head in the sand a little bit and go, I can't even deal with it right now? What are some tips?
Yeah, I mean, it is difficult because you've got a lot of anxiety around what's going on, and you just know it doesn't look that great. I would encourage everybody to open those envelopes and take a look, because it's a time when we have to be responsible for the investments that we make. Because when we look at this, the money that is accumulated in 401ks, whether it be part employer, part ourselves, is the result of a lot of energy that every worker has put into making it. They've expelled a lot of energy to make it. Mm-hmm. So it's very important that they do look at it, because that's the energy created for the future. It's easy to say, I don't want to look at it, it's gone down. It's important to do so because it's a time to really look and evaluate, what are your objectives in your life? When are you going to retire? Are you going to retire? How much do you need? And then sit down and sort of go through it and make adjustments in line with a financial advisor or whoever, your tax person, etc., and shift it around. Maybe look at, some of the future businesses that are going to grow, because it is going to be different. Choose where you've had concentration of stocks. Maybe get more diversification in. If you don't have international, get some international in there so you can get that diversification. Because at the end of the day, you're in wealth preservation. You grow your wealth by your incomes or from your businesses, mm-hmm. right? And so when you actually have the money in your 401k, your 401k is not going to make you rich, but it at least has to preserve capital and move with inflation or above, but without taking on too much risk. So yeah, absolutely, you should look at it, and the emphasis there really is diversification.
In previous conversations I've had with you, you've talked about having 18 months of money set aside to live on. That seems for the majority of people, I imagine, almost impossible when many live paycheck to paycheck.
Yep.
Is there, that's optimal, 18 months, a little nest egg. What's something more doable for the average person?
Well, the most doable thing actually is not to look at, either you have the cash or you don't, right? If you don't, then there's no point pretending you do, because it's about survival, right? So right. What you would look at is, you cannot project how much your 401k is going to grow at the moment. But what you can emphasize on is, where can I cut expenses? When was the last time we looked at our domestic budgets? How many times have we applied and paying for 23 different apps for our phones that we never use? Do we have credit card debt? Do we have mortgage debt? There's no harm in picking up the phone and trying to renegotiate and bring costs down so you can become as efficient as possible.
Right.
Then, if you're really short, then you do have to look at, how do I get the money to put food on the table? And that's a completely different game there, because you have to effectively borrow if you can.
Well, and I have heard there were some offers that if you borrowed against your 401k, you wouldn't be penalized as much. I'm sure you don't encourage people to do that.
Right.
Is there ever a reason that you would want to do that, or that it would make sense?
It makes sense if you really have a liquidity crunch. I mean, in the sense of, if you've lost your job, you've been furloughed, you don't have cash, and, it's stressful enough, then you have to be realistic. I mean, you have to deal with today, and then we'll figure out tomorrow when it comes. But, if you're lying in your bed and you're not sleeping at night because you don't know whether you're going to be feeding people tomorrow or meeting your obligations, then you really have to make the adjustments. And there's nothing wrong with it, because everybody is feeling that. It's a very difficult position.
It seems to me, Stuart, that maybe in the tech crunch, or, you talked about having survived the Asian currency crisis, the '87 crash, those hit segments of the population or a country or a region. This is a rare one where it is hitting the whole world. And obviously it's tragic. Does that make it any better or worse? I don't even know. How does that make it different?
Yeah, I think it forces us to reflect very closely on who we are as a globe, as a planet, and who we are as individuals in that role. I think what people have woken up to is we are interdependent. We are a globe. I mean, something happens in China and it affects people in Ohio or in Paris or wherever. We can't ignore that fact anymore. And people say, well, if we cut down global trade, don't have to deal with it. No, trade is always going to be there. Movement of people is always going to be present. So what we've got to determine is at the policy level is where is it we're going to help each other out? Is it on health? Is it on environment, peace, global strategies, etc.? I think that's where it changes. But I think when it gets to the day-to-day living part, we are going to see a lot more localization. I can't imagine us having China produce all our medical equipment, for example. There's going to have to be strategic decisions to bring that back. Mm-hmm. Communities, the good news on this is coming together. Local communities, we're actually becoming interdependent on each other. So I think some positive things will come out of it. And it's going to depend very much on how we open the economies again. How does Europe open? I mean, Italy, for example. China is open, but, we'll see what happens. Is there going to be another round of the virus coming through? So I think there's a lot of moving parts to this.
Well, and you're watching more of the global economies. How are you seeing any examples where you think, they're actually doing a pretty good job at it, or that's not working?
I think, and it's been pretty well publicized, places like South Korea, Israel, in the sense of the virus, defense, in a sense of how they've dealt with it. But they were prepared. They were equipped for it. I think basically because South Korea has the neighbors next door and Israel has their neighbors next door. So they're sort of more equipped for a crisis situation. The Western world, we were really caught unawares. So where are the opportunities here? I think the digital telecommunications and communication side of it is here to stay. I mean, that's an area where there's a lot of investment that's going to continue. You're going to see healthcare, boom in the sense of different ways we're going to do healthcare. Our hospitals cannot handle pandemics anywhere in the world, and that's why we have this stay at home and self-isolate. So we're going to have to look at more technology and dealing with things in the domestic field at home and locally. So, I think there's lots of areas that are going to develop from this. And it's going to be the same people. You've got the two largest trading blocks in the world that really do matter right now, and that's China and the United States. That's 50% of the world economy right there.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to figure out how to get on with each other better. And that's the opportunity. So if I was investing, I would invest, I'd look at emerging markets in Asia, for example, still. I would look in the US at companies that have good, strong balance sheets and a good product going forward. Europe's a difficult one. Europe is a very difficult one to determine where to invest.
You feel that Europe is in for a long slog trying to get out of this, and it may not look the same?
Yeah, I think Europe have got some, structural challenges. What is the role of the European community versus the sovereign states? Italy, Spain, France. And it's like when this crisis came up, the Italians were Italian and the French were French and the Germans were German. And there was sort of reluctance to support, certainly financially, Italy and Spain from the European community. They took a long time to respond, and I think they're battling with that. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, is a German taxpayer going to pay for the overspending of the Spanish in their debt? You know, they've got some complicated issues. It's great if it works, but I think they're going to be very slow at coming through this.
We're definitely seeing some cracks in this whole globalist idea of the globalist agenda, you could say. I mean, you could see that before this with the election of Donald Trump and with Brexit, even though that has been kind of a difficult coming through. Do you think the globalist agenda kind of moves forward, or do you think that's crumbled?
No, I think it's under review. I think it will be reviewed. You know, what exactly does that mean? You know, trade will always be global, always has been, always will be. Immigration, migration is going to continue. How do we handle that? You know, I mean, there's 248 million people in the world that don't live in the country that they originate from, me included. So, you know, it's a pretty large movement of people. That's going to happen. So how do we deal with those policies? What are immigration policies? Where do we have, you know, free travel in and out of countries, etc.? So globalization will be there. It can't be avoided. It's just in what dynamic is it going to show up? I think the role of government is going to be more crucial now than it's ever been, purely from a strategic and public policy issue, not just in the United States, China, throughout Asia, throughout Europe. And, you know, the initial blame game has to stop. And then it's like, okay, let's have some brain power and creative minds on how are we going to deal with this? How are we going to deal with the global health issue? How are we going to deal with the environment issues? I mean, they are big issues.
Yes, definitely. Seems like that's going to be difficult during an election year. It's, I mean, the worst time for a pandemic to hit during an election year when you have just a lot of this going on.
Right.
Maybe we can move beyond that, hopefully by November. If there was somebody out there who did have a pot of money sitting around and they said, you know what, I'm looking for some really good deals, maybe some fire sales, things like the airlines, the cruise industry, places that have really been hit hard, would you ever suggest that they buy something like that? Or are there some things you would suggest?
Well, it depends on the background of the person. Okay, I mean, it depends whether they're entrepreneurial or not. I've always taken this belief that you make money in your own business. You don't look to the public markets to make you money. There will be opportunities. And I don't think the cruise industry is finished, and I don't think the airline industry is finished. But yes, you could take some positions in there, but they are speculative. What you could pick up at the moment is what we call the high yield bond market, where there's been a defragmentation a little bit, where yields there have pushed up because of the deleveraging effect that happened. Because where people had leverage, they had to sell, and they sold everything. You know, I mean, when the markets went down that 35%, we actually at that time were buying, and you have to be pretty, you know, the stomach twists at that time. I don't care who you are. You think, oh, I got this right, what's going to happen? But there are true bargains that are out there. Now, the market's recovered quite a bit, and volatility is still going to be present. So I would err very much on, you know, diversification, keeping conservative, and then look for opportunities. I would not be a buyer of the cruise lines right now. And I think it's hard to do the airlines right now until we know what's happening with this virus, what's going to happen when it phases out. I think the recovery of money flowing in will be very quick because there's a lot of money out there.
You know, I've had a moment, I'm sure, just like everybody else, where I've woken up in the middle of the night worried at what's happening with the economy. Are we going to continue to see it? Then we'll have a couple of really good days on the market. And, you know, you just have this back and forth where you're panicked about things. What do you tell someone if it was a stranger on the subway or a loved one who's really stressed about this yo-yo back and forth and the oil market dropping? Is there
Yeah.
a bit of therapy or advice to maybe make people feel better about it?
Well, I can tell you we'll get through it, that's for sure. I mean, the world economy has gone through wars and it's gone through disease and pandemics before. It's hard to predict exactly the time frame from it. So it's really, we will get through it. What you've got to do is protect yourself between now and when that is. And that's why I always say the 18 months. Now, people don't have 18 months a lot of time, but the families we do, they think it's a lot, but it's like you want to be able to maintain your lifestyle whilst this gets sorted out. And maybe you have to cut back and reduce your lifestyle if you don't have the funds. But you get yourself to a position where, okay, I can live with this. I can breathe, and I know the markets will recover. And I would encourage people, yes, you do look at your 401k. Don't bury it. It's very important to take a look at it. Yeah, it's not pleasant, but it's like you got to own that was your money. You know, that you earned that. You got to look after it and keep an eye on it.
I'm actually surprised that we didn't go down more. I guess I was expecting it to continue to fall. Is there any surprise to you that we're seeming to kind of hold right around 23,000, I believe? I haven't checked today.
Yeah, around on the S&P around 2,800. The whole issue really came out in the sense of this is not a 2008 crisis. 2008 crisis was a financial crisis, and you could see clearly where it was. So there was a reluctance and slowness about providing liquidity to the markets and to the industries, etc., because it was a self-inflicted wound, if you like. This was not. This was a virus. You can try and blame people, but the reality is who knows where it started, but it became a global health issue. And the speed of response by countries around the world immediately to put money into the system to make sure the financial markets could smoothly operate and money could flow around, the fiscal stimulus effect.
Yeah.
In a sense, I mean, that's big money. And we all criticize our government, but Congress actually, when the chip was down, actually did deliver, maybe about a few days too late. But, you can always criticize. But they did it. They did their job. They got the money out. The Federal Reserve were, in my view, superb throughout this. I mean, they were quick, responsive. And what that happened is then we effectively also nationalized our payroll. I mean, the government the government is backstopping payroll right now for a lot of small businesses. That's really sort of unheard of. So people have that confidence that, I'm possibly going to be all right. They're actually caring for me. The question is how long does it go for?
Yeah. Okay, I've got two more questions for you. One involves opening up, and we're starting to see states look at opening up. Some states are saying they're like Georgia, I believe next week. Do you think that's a good idea? Do you think we need to get things moving? Your thoughts on that? Well,
I mean, it's a tough one because you've got this decision between health and the domestic health, individual families' economics. I mean, in the sense of, I don't have the money, I need to get back to work to pay. Okay, if I keep the social distancing and we get the things that we need in measure, will that be okay? I don't think anyone has really worked out which is the right way to go, but we've got to start doing something and start moving it forward because it's like anything else. Someone has to be the first to open, right? I mean, and we don't know whether the virus kicks up again, and time will tell. Europe are being very cautious about it. France is still stuck inside. Italy, I'm not sure where they are with it now, but they'll start to open because you don't want to keep the economy shut down for too long, but you also don't want to create a huge health crisis again with overcapacity, over demand of the hospitals, etc. So I think our state governors and mayors, et cetera, have a very challenging job. It's not easy to work that out. You want to be able to get that balance. I don't think the virus is going to be going away. I think there's a chance that we might have to have intermittent shutdowns again, until we have the vaccine.
I think for me, the frightening part is we don't know this virus. And okay, we're all kind of getting used to the world we're in right now, but what if we were to get some really bad news about the virus and we found out it behaves in a different way that's more frightening? To me, that's what keeps me still awake at night. And I'm sure for investors, that's in the back of your mind.
Well, I think also it's when we're in a state of fear, there's this philosopher, he actually wrote a good book. It's a gentleman called Thomas Hobbes, and this was in 1651. He said, fear and I were born twins. Okay, so basically there's me and there's fear. And we live in that space of fear because that's our instinct. So the danger is we project so far into the unknown, and it's very rarely positive when we project.
Yeah.
No, it's very negative. All I would say is just people just stick to where we are right now, stay in the moment. We don't know what happens, and we'll deal with the virus if it comes around a second time. But I'm pretty optimistic we will find vaccines. We have very smart people in this world.
Yeah.
They will figure it out. Not me, but they will.
Well, like you, Stuart, like you. Somebody once told me, don't worry, you probably don't even remember what your biggest worry was 6 months ago. And I thought, wow, I'm sure I do. And then I thought about it and I couldn't remember what I was worrying about 6 months ago. Yeah. I do think we will remember the pandemic.
Oh, that I have no doubt, because it's like anything that's a shock in the system. But it's, you know, I would just say worry about the things you're going to do today, get the schedule right, you know, be in the sense of logical as much as you can. And if you're fearful, just remind yourself you don't have to react. The biggest mistakes are made is when you react. Market's going down, sell, you know, or do that. And it's usually the worst thing to do. And it's the hardest thing. And we're professionals and we do it. And it's like, we don't like that feeling either. Nobody does. But it's just, we've just gone through enough of these things to know, okay, I'm worried as much as everybody else, but I have to be cool in the sense of calculating what this is. And if you can get to that state where you're not making reactive changes to your financial situation by panic or thinking you're going to survive, then you know, then you're in a good position to move forward. But the staying awake at night worrying about the pandemic, my advice on that is just, if you can do it, get a good therapist.
You know, early on, I think a lot of people were, and then you go, wow, we're several weeks into this. I need to sleep at one point. Stuart Adam with Adam and Partners, thank you so much for joining us and helping us, I guess, feel a little better about the situation we're in, at least that we're going to survive it.
I hope so. Thanks very much, Kari.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Once again, that was our very own, right here from in-house Fox 10 Phoenix, Kari Lake, interviewing Stuart Adam, and he is with CEO Adam Partners.